Exposed, the sinister haunting in Mazamitla'S cursed cabin discover the hidden terrors. The cabin loomed like a dark secret, cloaked in shadows and whispers that echoed through the ancient trees. David Johnson, an overworked accountant, believed this rustic retreat would offer his family a weekend of reprieve from their hectic lives in suburban Chicago. But as night fell, the air thickened with an unsettling tension that sent chills racing down his spine. He watched his wife, Maria, and their teenage children, Emily and Jake, burst into laughter, their joy almost palpable against the backdrop of looming dread. Little did they know, their stay in Mazamitla was about to unravel into a nightmare. As the sun dipped below the mountains, the ambience shifted. A crackling fire flickered, illuminating the cabin's rough-hewn walls, casting eerie shadows that danced ominously. The family shared ghost stories, each tale feeding the shadows lurking just out of sight. David's heart raced as he looked around. The safe haven he envisioned was slowly becoming a horror scene, stirring his protective instincts. "We're fine," he asserted, yet his voice trembled slightly, revealing a crack in his brave facade. When whispers began to seep through the walls, like the wind's sinister caress, David dismissed them. "Just the wind," he reassured everyone, though a knot of uneasiness tightened in his gut. A gust ruffled the trees outside, making them creak and groan. It felt like they were watching, waiting, for something. A creeping sensation of dread settled over him, doubt clawing at the back of his mind. "Did you hear that?" "Sounds like voices," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it's just animals?" Jake shrugged, but he, too, fiddled nervously with the edge of his sleeve, shaking off the cold grips of fear. They huddled closer to the flames. But as the night deepened, hints of spectral activity escalated, a flicker of the lights, the shuddering cold spots, the unbearable sense of being watched. David felt the cabin's walls closing in, the warmth of the fire offering no comfort. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let us continue. The next day, driven by dread, Maria insisted they learn the history of their cabin. They ventured to the local library, each step deeper into the gloom of her growing anxiety. The dusty book they uncovered revealed chilling tales about a cult that had once thrived nearby. They had performed dark rites, sacrifices hidden beneath the very earth the cabin was built upon. The family exchanged worried glances, the weight of the legacy pressing down on them. That evening, a knock on the door fractured their fragile connection to safety. Neighbors, with friendly smiles, shared unsettling insights about the previous occupants. Their words dripped with a knowledge that sent shivers down David's spine. Their warm welcome grew increasingly hostile. Heart pounding, David sensed lurking malevolence. Had they been drawn into something sinister beyond their imagination? As night fell again, the gravity of their predicament sunk in. Flickering lights turned to darkness, whispers grew into an unbearable chorus, and shadows slipped just beyond the cabin's periphery. David's instincts screamed at him to flee, but the exit had vanished. Roads twisted in impossibly intricate patterns, encasing them in a waking nightmare. What if the very community they sought refuge in was shackled to the cabin's dark past? The whispers crescendoed, weaving an ominous promise. Nightmares awaited as darkness enveloped them. David huddled his family tight, heart racing. Would they escape the clutches of this unseen terror, or were they destined to become part of the cursed tale that haunted Mazamitla? The cabin creaked and groaned like it was alive, each sound a warning, a reminder of the horrors buried in the earth beneath it. The shadows danced more frantically now, flickering against the walls like erratic spirits, feeding on the family's growing despair. David sat on the edge of the sofa, eyes flicking nervously toward the windows, feeling the oppressive darkness crawl closer with every passing moment. Maria was silent, her eyes darting around, absorbing the image of their retreat-turned-mausoleum. We can't stay here," she whispered, barely audible over the crackling fire. David, frozen in fear, didn't respond. He felt paralyzed, as if the air was thick with unseen chains, binding him to the seat. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the heavy air. Just then, a low, mournful wail slipped through the walls, pulling all their gazes toward the darkened corners of the cabin. The sound reverberated, stirring a primal fear that clutched at their hearts. Jake jumped to his feet, eyes wide. "What was that?" "Just the wind," David said, forcing bravado into his voice, though doubt not at him. Outside, the trees howled back, twisted branches clawing at the sky, beckoning with unfathomable promises. But deep down, he knew the truth. They were not alone. Emily stood, staring at the windows, her breath hitching. "I don't like this, it feels wrong." Before David could reassure her, the lights flickered violently. The flickering became a stutter, plunging the room into brief darkness before bursting back into light. In that heartbeat of absence, sinister faces flashed in the shadows, and with it came the overwhelming scent of decay. It stung David's nostrils, a sickly sweet odor that turned his stomach. "Did you smell that?" Maria gasped, her face paling. "Yeah, what is that?" Jake coughed, his hand instinctively over his mouth. David froze, heart thudding painfully against his ribs. "It's nothing. It's just stale air." But his own words felt hollow. He was already losing grip on the fragments of his sanity. A soft rasp echoed near the door. They turned, eyes locked, breath held. A moment passed like an eternity, the tension so thick it nearly suffocated them. Then another knock. This one was sharper, more insistent. Maria jumped, recoiling into David's side. "Don't answer it." But instinct pulled David toward the door. Curiosity and dread warred within him. He hesitated, swallowing hard, and slowly reached for the latch. The floorboard creaked beneath him, as though protesting his decision not. He flung the door open, revealing nothing but the darkened porch, lit by a sliver of moonlight. No one was there. Wind tousled the trees, whispering secrets just out of reach. Panic bloomed inside, heart racing. Something was off. He slammed the door, sealing the void of the outside world once more. "Who was it?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. "No one, just the wind," he lied again, but deep down, he felt the nagging truth seep through. Something was watching them, and it was hungry. The room grew colder, breath visible, mixing with the petrified atmosphere. The whispers returned, creeping through the cracks in the wood. David closed his eyes, battling the urge to scream. They needed a plan, an escape, but each avenue seemed to fold back on itself, trapping them in an inescapable maze of horror. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the wall, a figure barely discernible, something pale, something with hollow eyes waiting. David's breath quickened. As if sensing his despair, the whispers twisted, forming words now, chilling him to the bone. "Join us." The family huddled tighter, each face illuminated by flickering candlelight, fear locking them into a shared gaze. But fear was only the beginning. The true horror was still to come. What awaited them in the darkness beyond the cabin walls? Would they ever escape the sinister legacy that beckoned them closer? With a sickening lurch, the lights flickered again, plunging them into darkness once more. The whispers intensified, drawing closer, wrapping around them like cold fingers, and somewhere deep within the shadows, a voice beckoned. "Your time is near." The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. David clenched his fists, trying to keep the panic at bay. "We need to stay calm," he said, though his voice trembled. He could feel the weight of his family's fear pressing against him, amplifying his own. Emily's wide eyes reflected the flickering light. "What do we do? We can't just sit here." Her voice cracked, and David swallowed hard, wishing he had answers. I think we should." But before he could finish, the whispers intensified, spiraling into a maddening chorus. The words twisted around him, sinking into his mind like poison. Join us, join us." Maria clutched her head, shaking it as if to dispel the voices. "It's just the wind," she repeated, but her certainty was waning. "We should look for a way out." The thought raced through David's mind. But escape meant facing whatever lurked outside, and every knock of wind against the cabin mocked him, reminding him of the unseen danger. He pushed the thought down, unwilling to voice the fear that gnawed at the corners of his mind. Just then, a loud crash erupted from the back of the cabin. They all jumped, hearts leaping into their throats. "Jake," David whispered, eyeing the hallway that led to the bedrooms. "Go check it out." "Me?" Jake's voice quivered. "Why me?" Because we can't just sit here waiting to die, David said, struggling to keep his voice steady as despair crept in. Reluctantly, Jake nodded, edging toward the hallway. The shadows seemed to shrink away as he passed, fingers stretching from the walls, reaching eagerly. Be careful, Maria urged, her voice breaking. As Jake disappeared into the darkness, the cabin felt even more alive. The whispers now seemed to weave messages of malice through the air. Join us. A fleeting glimpse of something cold and pale flickered beyond the doorway, and David's heart raced as terror surged through him. Jake! He called out, but the cabin absorbed his voice, leaving only a chilling silence in its wake. Maria's voice trembled, her eyes darting back to the door. What if he doesn't come back? He will, David said, though doubt not at him. The air grew dense, the scent of decay stronger, and with it came a sickening realization. Whatever cursed this place was hungry for fear, feasting on the despair that seeped from them. Jake stepped back into view, his eyes wide. There's something in there, he stammered. It's not just shadows, it's something else. What do you mean? Emily asked, panic evident in every syllable. It's looking at me, Jake whispered, horror curling his lips. It's not human. Before David could respond, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. Even the dying embers in the fireplace couldn't hold back the shadows. Then, the whispers transformed into a chilling chant. Your time is near, your time is near. David's breath quickened as he felt the darkness coalesce, taking form. A figure loomed, swirling in the absence of light, eyes glowing as they locked onto him. Join us. The family's hearts beat as one, fear cascading into an electric jolt of desperation. In a moment of clarity, David realized they had a choice: fight or succumb. But as he reached for the fire poker resting against the hearth, he felt a tug, an invisible pull, dragging at his resolve. Stay together! He shouted, thrusting the poker toward the menacing shadow before him. The cabin shuddered, protesting against the impending confrontation, but before he could strike, a deafening silence fell, and the figure smiled, a grin filled with emptiness. You can't fight what's already here. And just as those words echoed in the air, the power flickered one last time, plunging them into complete darkness. What would happen if he let go? Would they become part of this twisted legacy? As cold fingers brushed against his skin, David realized the true terror was just beginning. Would they find the strength to confront this nightmare, or would they be consumed by the very darkness they sought to escape? David's heart was hammering in his chest, each beat a reminder of the encroaching dread swirling around them. A suffocating silence wrapped the cabin, feeling alive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. Is anyone there? Jake's voice trembled in the dark, barely a whisper. It sent a chill down David's spine, the way it felt so small against the void. Stay close, David shouted, though he felt the hopelessness creep in. The shadows felt thicker, oppressive, crawling over the floorboards like whispered secrets. Maybe we should go outside, Emily suggested, her voice quaking with fear. We can't just stay here. No, Maria gasped, her face pale, eyes darting around. It's out there, whatever that is. We can't leave the cabin. With each word, the tension crackled like static in the air. David clutched the fire poker tighter, the metal cool against his sweating palm. He could feel his family's desperation. It enveloped him, closing in tight as the creature's gaze weighed down upon him, igniting every instinct to flee. But where would they go? The walls vibrated with an angered hum, as if the spirits of the cabin were enraged at their defiance. The chanting rose again, piercing through the silence. Your time is near, your time is near. It echoed off the walls, wrapping around them like a noose. Shut up! David roared, swinging the poker wildly in the direction of the voice. It connected with nothing but air, leaving him empty, grasping at fear. Jake's voice broke through the haze. Look! David turned. A cold breeze swept through the cabin, rattling windows and sending a shiver down his spine. In that moment, he saw a figure materializing from the shadows, tall and grotesque, limbs extending unnaturally. Its eyes glowed with malevolence, fixated on him, frosty tendrils reaching out as if to pull him in. No! Emily shrieked, her face a mask of terror. She stumbled back, pressing against the wall as if it could protect her from the encroaching horror. "Get away from her!" David shouted, taking a step forward. Fire poker raised. The figure chuckled, a sound that was low and rumbling, reverberating through the room. "You think you can protect them?" Its voice was a sickly sweet whisper. "You'll all join us soon enough. You're running out of time." The shadows flickered closer, cutting off paths to escape. It felt like the air thinned, wrapping around them like a constrictor. The walls pulsated, thirsting to swallow them whole. "Run!" David screamed, pivoting toward the front door. As they bolted back, a terrifying screech echoed, drowning them in dread. They collided into each other, scrambling for the exit, the horror behind them clawing at their heels. The door was locked, the knob refusing to budge. Panic set in. A wave of sheer desperation crashed over them. "David!" cried Jake, his voice rising with terror. "It's on us!" With a desperate push, David slammed his shoulder against the door, adrenaline coursing through him. "Hold on. We'll break it down." But the cabin betrayed their every attempt. The walls hissed, the floor trembled as if alive, and the whispers morphed into a cacophony. Join us, it wrapped around them like ice. Then, a noise, not just whispers, but something crashing behind them. David turned, heart frozen as he saw the figure gliding toward them, the air crackling with dark energy. Its hand reached out, and shadows slithered like snakes towards him. Would they escape? Or was this truly the end? In a moment that felt suspended in time, David's grip on the poker tightened. "We fight. Now!" And just as they gathered their resolve, the earth beneath them gave way, pulling David into the darkness, a chilling scream erupting from his throat. What lay beneath that abyss? Were they about to uncover a horror worse than the dark itself? David's descent was disorienting, a whirlpool of shadows engulfing him. He felt the ground drop away, his screams swallowed by the void as he tumbled into darkness. Panic surged like a tidal wave. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He hit an unforgiving surface, a jarring impact that rang through his bones, the wind knocked from his lungs. "David!" He heard Emily's frantic voice echoing above, fraying his already taut nerves, but the darkness clung to him, thick and suffocating. It pressed down on him, drawing out his breath until he gasped for air. The air was bitter, tasting of decay. He struggled to sit up, the sensation of being underground clawed at his mind. David blinked, pushing the shadows aside as he tried to get oriented. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out all other sounds except for a faint creaking, a slow, deliberate sound like wooden bones moving in rhythm to an ancient heartbeat. "Is everyone okay?" he called, his voice sounding weak in the suffocating gloom. "David!" Jake's voice came from his left, laced with fear. "We fell through. Where are we?" "Just hang tight." David scrambled to his feet, shaking off the residual disorientation. He felt along the wall, smooth and cold, grounding himself. Panic threatened to take over again. Were the others still up there? Was the creature pursuing them, lurking just beyond sight? He needed to protect them. His fingers brushed against something sharp jutting out from the ground. He bent down, feeling an object, a rusted pipe. It was heavy, solid, and he gripped it like a lifeline, raising it as he turned to search for the others. Before he could call out again, the air turned electric. A light flickered far down the tunnel, illuminating grotesque faces that twisted and writhed. They were there, captured in that glimpse, a myriad of expressions, some in agony, others twisted in malicious glee, their eyes bored into him, hungry for fear. "Keep moving," David urged. "This way." He began to lead, pushing through the creeping dread. The narrow corridor felt alive, almost sentient, the grime beneath his feet like insects crawling. Emily and Jake echoed behind him, their whispered confirmations mixing with their breathless panic. Then, a sound shared through the darkness, a low hum vibrating the walls. "Join us, join us." It echoed, growing louder, sinking into their minds, warping their resolve. He pressed on, sweat collecting at his brow as he fought against the chant pulling at him, threatening to snare his thoughts. "Don't listen to it," he yelled, though his throat felt tight and raw. Suddenly, the pipe slipped from his hand, clattering against the ground, filling the space with a discordant clang. He cursed under his breath, fumbling to retrieve it. But when he straightened, a dark figure stood at the tunnel's end, its silhouette backlit by the flickering light. The energies around them shifted, growing denser, brooding. "Welcome back." It spoke familiar yet foreign. Its voice reverberated with power, resonating in David's bones, recalling memories long buried. Terror coiled deep in David's gut. No, he took a step back, but the others pressed closer, instinctively drawn toward the figure, entranced by its presence. "Fight it!" he shouted, grasping for clarity. "It's a trick!" The figure stepped into the light, revealing a visage that stung with recognition, someone he lost long ago, their features twisted by darkness. "That was your last chance to escape, David," not just a whisper, but a command that resonated with dread. "Now, you belong with us." David felt the walls closing in. Fear washed over him, so fierce that it hurt. The air thickened, suffocating their voices, as shadows began to pull at their feet, dragging them towards the figure. "No!" he screamed. "We will not join you." And just as the weight of despair threatened to swallow him up, the tunnel began to tremble violently, the walls shaking free the grotesque faces that hovered at the edges. Would he save them? Or would this reunion become their final bond? Before he could answer, the ground shifted again, and a blinding light erupted ahead, forcing him to shield his eyes. What lay behind that light? Was it salvation, or the final trap? David shielded his eyes, his heart pounding louder than the low hum surrounding them. The light pierced through the darkness like a beacon, but the flicker sent shivers down his spine. What awaited them in that brightness? As the tremors subsided, he dared to edge forward, gripping the rusted pipe tightly. "Stay close," he warned, feeling the weight of his fear pressing down even more. He turned to Emily and Jake, their faces pale, eyes wide with dread. "Whatever you do, don't separate." The ground beneath them felt unstable as they moved toward the light, the shadows striving to reclaim their prey. David could sense the presence of the figure behind them, a dark yearning for their surrender. Each step felt like walking on a cliff's edge, the drop to despair never far behind. As they neared the source of the light, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, revealing grotesque murals on the walls, paintings of people in torment, their faces frozen in expressions of horror and disbelief. It was a gallery of suffering, alive in its depiction of despair. David's stomach turned. This place was not just haunted, it was a shrine to anguish. "Look!" Emily whispered, pointing towards the center of the chamber. There lay an altar, fashioned from what appeared to be bone and scattered remnants of the crushed earth beneath. An odd mist curled around it, twisting in shapes that resembled hands reaching out for salvation. Dust swirled in the light, creating an atmosphere thick enough to cut. David took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Maybe we can find a way out or something to help us fight it." But even as he spoke, a chill crept over the back of his neck. He turned back to the tunnel entrance. The figure lingered, watching, waiting. The faces around it began to whisper, their voices soft yet insistent, chanting, join us, a chorus of lost souls, dragging him deeper into the web of their despair. Jake knelt beside the altar, trembling. "David! What if we offer something? To appease it?" "No!" David snapped, panic clawing at him again. "This isn't a negotiation. We need to fight back." Just then, the mist rose from the altar, coiling around Jake's arm. He gasped as the mist pulsed, dark voices clawing for his mind, urging him towards the altar's sinister power. Emily lunged forward to pull him back, but the grip of the shadows latched onto her too. "Fight it!" David shouted desperately, swinging the pipe at the encroaching mist, which parted momentarily but quickly resumed its grasp. He charged forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You won, take them!" he yelled, hurling the pipe at the altar. It struck with a resounding thud, cracking the surface. The altar shuddered, and a scream reverberated through the air, the sound of 1,000 tortured souls rising in furious agony. The walls pulsed with energy, raking against David's skin as the very fabric of the place twisted. "This is a mistake!" Emily cried, her voice drowned in the chaos. In that moment, David felt a surge of instinct urging him to save them, to protect his friends from whatever darkness lurked in wait. With desperate urgency, he grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her back just as the ground shook violently. The altar split open, releasing a blinding light that expanded like a sun, illuminating the distorted figures that writhed in agony, enslaved spirits beckoning him closer with hollow eyes. As the light intensified, David felt his thoughts slipping, the chant becoming a solid weight in his mind. Shadows wrapped around him, thick and hungry. "It's too late," a voice echoed, sinister and seductive. "You've unleashed what should remain buried." With one last burst of will, he pulled Emily and Jake toward the tunnel, retreating from the altar's chaos. But just as they turned to flee, the light erupted, followed by a shriek that shattered their senses. Something dark slithered out from the altar, rising behind them. "Run!" David screamed, adrenaline pumping. But even as they fled, a grim question lingered in David's mind: would they escape the horrors of the past, or had they just awakened a nightmare meant to consume them all? As they stumbled back into the tunnel, the echo of their hurried breaths mingled with the twisted groans of the chamber. David felt the weight of the darkness pressing in from all sides, like a predator ready to pounce. The air was thick with malevolence, and he could almost feel the eyes of the figure lurking just out of sight, watching, waiting for their moment of weakness. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice strained yet commanding. Jake and Emily glanced back, terror etched across their faces, but they pushed onward, driven by sheer instinct. The tunnel twisted, becoming narrower, almost claustrophobic. Shadows danced along the walls, swirling like smoke, and David braced himself against them, trying to hold on to reality. Every step echoed a dreadful rhythm, pounding in his skull. "Do you think we lost it?" Jake panted, his voice trembling. He glanced nervously over his shoulder. David shook his head, a cold sweat forming on his brow. "No. It's still there. We can't stop now." Behind them, a whisper slithered through the air, chilling and malevolent. "You cannot escape." The voice, ghastly and echoing, crawled into their ears, dragging along a trail of dread. It was the same voice that had taunted them in that cursed chamber, the echo of lost souls. In a frantic dash, they turned another corner, the flickering light from the chamber fading behind them. But the tunnel continued its dark embrace, the weight of despair growing heavier with every stride. They reached a fork where the path split in two, shadows pooling in both directions. "Which way?" Emily asked, her voice strained, panic bubbling to the surface. "Left," David said without thinking, memory colliding with instinct. It was the same route they had taken to enter. As they surged down the left tunnel, the walls seemed to pulse with life, almost pressing in on them as if alive. David pressed on, fear electrifying his every nerve. Suddenly, Jake stopped short. "Wait. Listen." He held up a hand, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. Silence filled the air, thick and suffocating. David strained to hear, his heart racing. And then he heard it, the low, sinister growl. It curled through the darkness like a serpent, echoing off the damp stone walls. "It knows where we are," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fright. "Don't look back," David barked, forcing movement. He grasped Emily's hand tightly in his, pulling her forward, but as they pressed on, the shadow shifted, molding into familiar shapes. Faces emerged from the darkness, twisted with agony, their mouths moving in silent screams. David's terror threatened to overwhelm him. "Keep going," he urged, tearing his gaze from the faces of the lost. The growl grew louder, rumbling with an impatient fury, the thing stalking them, a hunter ready to strike. Air rushed from his lungs as they raced against time itself. Just as they neared a faint glimmer in the distance, an unbearable pressure knocked into them, throwing David and his friends to the ground. He gasped, stunned, heart hammering. The shadow surrounded them, alive with wicked intent, crawling closer like a fog rolling in. David scrambled to his feet, pulling Jake up as a slithering mass of darkness twisted forth, forming a monstrous shape, an embodiment of the terror they had unleashed. It towered over them with ghastly eyes burning like embers, a mouth twisted into a sinister grin. "Join us," it hissed, voices layering over one another like a pact made in malice. "No!" David shouted, rallying his strength. "We'll fight." He swung his pipe wildly, but it passed through the darkness effortlessly, as if it had struck nothing. The growl morphed into a ferocious roar, echoing down the tunnel, reverberating within his skull. David turned to flee, urging Emily and Jake forward, but as they dashed blindly toward the light at the end, David couldn't shake the chilling question that clawed at him: would they find freedom, or were they merely running to their doom? The darkness behind them, it was not just chasing them. It was calling them home. They sprinted toward the glimmer of light, hope flickering in David's chest, but it felt distant like a cruel mirage. Fatigue gnawed at them, slowing their feet, even as the growl behind them morphed into a frenzy, a whirlwind of fury that clawed at the edges of their sanity. Faster! David screamed, pumping his legs harder. The light ahead shattered the oppressive darkness, but the sound of their pursuer, the thing they had disturbed, was gaining. Just as the tunnel opened into a wider space, David stumbled into something cold and wet. He looked down, heart sinking. It was water, a shallow pool reflecting shadows on the walls, pulsing like the beast stalking them. They pushed through it, shoes squishing, but it felt like molasses, slowing their escape. Behind them, a voice hissed through the air, wrapping around their minds. "You cannot flee from what you are," it echoed, sickeningly personal, drilling into David's psyche. Panic clawed up his throat. What did that even mean? He glanced at Emily. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "David, what does it want? What are we supposed to do?" "I don't know," he barked, desperation spilling into every word. They had to keep moving more than ever now. Through a haze of dread, David spotted a dark opening on the far wall, a potential exit. But would it mean safety, or would it lead them deeper into the abyss? They surged forward toward the opening, their breaths ragged. Just as they reached the threshold, Jake stumbled. David spun around, grabbing Jake's arm to steady him. "Come on. We have to go." But before they could lunge into the opening, shadows erupted from the edges, snaking around Jake's ankles, yanking him down. "David! Help!" Jake screamed, panic surging through his voice. "No!" David lunged for him, but it was too late. Shadows dragged Jake down, pulling him into the darkness. David felt a cold grip tighten around his heart. "Jake! No!" Emily tugged at David's sleeve, fear wide in her eyes. "We can't lose him. We can't leave him behind. We don't have a choice." David yelled, feeling the shadows creep closer to them. Jake's terrified screams echoed through the tunnel, and that deep growl answered, a guttural satisfaction that sent ice through David's veins. Torn between saving Jake and their own survival, David said, "We have to keep moving. If we get trapped here, we all die." With one last look at the swirling darkness, his heart breaking, David and Emily dashed through the opening, desperation propelling them forward. The tunnel transformed into a smaller passage, and they crawled on hands and knees, the ground slick with moisture. David's breath came in sharp gasps, mind racing, searching for solutions. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but Jake's voice echoed, urging them to flee. Suddenly, the narrow tunnel opened into an underground cavern, lit by an eerie phosphorescence that cast grotesque shadows on the walls. The air felt electric, sparse, and heavy. "What is this place?" Emily whispered, scanning the cavern. "I don't know," David replied, eyes roaming the strange formations that jutted from the cavernous ceiling like jagged teeth. There was no way Jake could have made it to safety here unless the creature had taken him. Each heartbeat resonated louder as silence fell again, tightening its grip on them. In the dim light, David saw piles of bones, remnants of previous wanderers, each one telling a story of how hope crumbles into despair. Panic surged up again. With a shudder, he turned to Emily, gripping her arm tightly. "We need to find another way out." Just then, a throaty chuckle echoed throughout the cavern, a true taunt filled with malice. "You think you can escape? You are mine now." The laugh wrapped around David like a vice, tightening until he could barely breathe. They were trapped. "David, what do we do?" Emily pleaded, eyes darting around, searching frantically for an exit, but before David could answer, he heard a strange sound from the shadows, a whispering chant layered with sorrow. It was so familiar, he could have sworn it was Jake's voice. "Help me, come back, Jake!" "David!" shouted, despair spilling from him like blood. The walls shimmered and twisted, distorting the path behind them. They were cut off, the darkness closing in. David felt the shadows reaching out, fingers clawing at his very essence, yearning to consume him whole. He had one thought in that moment as he faced the dark: escape was more elusive than he ever realized. The presence of Jake lingered in the back of his mind, a haunting echo. What had they awakened? And at what cost? Then, a new voice broke through the cacophony, louder and clearer, an unearthly demand. Join us. In that instant, David understood. If they didn't escape, they would become like the bones scattered around them, lost forever in a haunted dream. Emily, this way. He dragged her toward a crevice that seemed to pulse like a wounded heart, but in the chaos, doubt seeped into him. Was this merely another trap? As they squeezed through, the darkness erupted behind them in a terrible fury, ripping through the air like a storm. Would they reach the other side? Or were they charging headlong into something worse? David had to know, but as he pressed forward, he sensed a chilling answer waiting just ahead. The crevice was narrow, slick with moisture and fear. David pushed harder, heart racing, arms straining against the walls as he pulled Emily through the suffocating darkness. Shadows poured behind them like liquid night, desperate to claim their souls. With every breath, the oppressive air filled his lungs like a lead weight, dragging him into the depths of despair. Don't look back. David gasped, feeling the whisper of cold breath brushing against the nape of his neck. It was there. Whatever hunted them, it was right behind them. Emily whimpered as they squeezed through the gap, her voice a threat of panic. What if we can't get through? We will. He willed himself to believe it. Just a little further. The shadows writhed, clawing at David's ankles. He could almost feel a grip tightening around his legs, dragging him back. Desperation ignited a burst of adrenaline. Keep moving, Emily. He shoved against the crack, forcing them onward until they burst into a larger chamber. They stumbled into a sprawling cave illuminated by a dim but flickering light, casting long, crazed shadows that danced with menace. The floor was covered in bone fragments, a grim tapestry that suffocated the little glimmers of hope. David's heart sank further. How many had met their end here? What is this place? Emily whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, but it feels wrong. His pulse quickened as the growls transformed into distorted whispers, filling the air with a sinister symphony. They were surrounded, trapped in a theater of nightmares. Suddenly, from the flickering light, a figure emerged, a silhouette cloaked in darkness, its features morphing in and out of visibility as if reality itself rebelled against its existence. David felt bile rise in his throat. What do you want from us? He yelled, defiance mixing with fear. But the figure merely smiled, a twisted grin splintering its face. You have come to pay your respects, have you not? To join the lost? They whisper your name. No. Emily screamed, scrambling backward, but there was nowhere to hide. David's instincts screamed to fight, to run, but he felt rooted in place. The whispers enveloped him, chilling his spine. Come back, join lost forever. No. David roared, slamming his palms against his ears. We're not like you. The echoes ricocheted in the cavern, laughter mingling with the growls, mocking their defiance. The audience of shadows shifted, swirling around in a frenzied dance. David clenched his fists, struggling against the tidal wave of terror crashing over him. Emily, we need to find a way out. Now. He turned to spot an exit, a faint shimmer in the distance, but the figure lunged forward, its arms extending, clawed fingers reaching out to ensnare them. David felt something scraping against his skin, like icy fingers probing for his heart. You will be part of us. You are already marked. No. He shouted, agony digging deep into his core. Desperation turned into instinct. Run! They bolted toward the shimmer, the figure's laughter chasing them like a cursed wind. Greater shadows pursued, eager to feast on their fear. As they sprinted across the cavern floor, David risked a glance back. Emily was slipping behind, tangled in the creeping shadows that clawed at her legs, the once solid ground now crumbling under weight despair. David, please. She begged. No. He couldn't abandon her. He couldn't. Grab my hand. With a last-ditch effort, David lunged backward, grasping her wrist as he pulled her toward the exit. The figure shrieked, a sound of pure fury that echoed like thunder in the chamber. Bursting through the shimmering threshold, David felt a sudden jolt, as if the very fabric of the world had shifted. The air grew thin, electric, but they were clear at least for a moment. Yet, the echoes of the cavern whispered still, promising that their ordeal was far from over. There was a darkness lurking just beyond, waiting for their moment of weakness. What was that? Emily breathed, eyes wide in horror, tremors shaking her frame. David's heart dropped as he surveyed his surroundings, realizing they stood at the mouth of yet another tunnel, but this one felt different. The darkness beyond was heavier, pulsing with a life of its own. Whatever it is, it's not done with us. The hollow laughter and chants swirled around them anew. Each moment creaked with tension, every heartbeat drummed with fear. The ominous cold beckoned a new horror, a final reality that they would soon face. As they crept further into the unknown, David stifled a shudder. They left the cave's light and warmth behind, knowing the deeper they went, the closer they came to uncovering the truth of their torment, but at what cost? Then, from the shadows, a low voice rasped, "You cannot escape the inevitable, you're already part of us." Pressure gripped David's chest. Was escaping just a fantasy? Or were they running straight into the death trap that awaited them? David's heart pounded, every beat echoing the dark words that filled the tunnel. "We have to keep moving," he urged Emily, though his voice wavered. The shadows shimmered with a life of their own, and despair clawed at their heels like a relentless predator. They pressed forward, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they entered a wide chamber filled with echoes of past anguish. The walls loomed, adorned with haunting murals depicting twisted faces locked in torment and fear. The atmosphere thickened, a palpable sense of dread clung to the air, squeezing at their throats. Caught in a web of despair, they stood paralyzed, absorbing the horrific scene playing out around them. "David, we can't stay here," Emily whispered, her voice laced with terror, shivering against the cold. Just then, from a dark corner of the chamber, a low growl rumbled, rising steadily until it morphed into chilling laughter. David turned, instincts screaming to escape, and he grabbed Emily's hand tightly. "Follow me." They sprinted across the cavern, shadows swirling around them like angry wraiths, intent on dragging them back into despair. David couldn't bear to look back, fear sharpening his focus. Just as they reached the far wall, a figure surged toward them, malformed and grotesque, eyes ablaze with hunger. "Join us," it rasped, its voice a haunting echo of their own fears. "No!" David yelled, his raw voice shattered into the cavern's insanity. He swung the rusted pipe wildly, desperation fueling his movements. It connected with the creature, and an otherworldly shriek filled the air, a horrific sound that reverberated through their bones. The vibrancy of its form dissipated like smoke. David felt their slim chance kindling, a flicker against the encroaching darkness. They charged toward the faint light exiting the chamber, their hearts synchronized in desperate rhythm. "Keep going," he urged Emily, determination igniting his spirits, leading her through the treacherous terrain. Yet each step felt mired in syrupy dread. The whispers returned, growling with abandon. "You cannot escape," they taunted, circling around them like a predator. As they neared the tunnel's end, the shadows erupted, coiling tightly around David's feet, dragging him back toward the abyss. He clenched his jaw, willing himself to fight against the darkness, but felt his strength wane. "Emily!" he shouted, panic slicing through him. She pulled against the shadows, desperately reaching for him. "Don't let go!" David gasped, summoning every ounce of energy. That moment stitched their resolve together tighter than fear could sever. With one mighty heave, he yanked away from the grasping darkness, collapsing onto the tunnel's precipice. "David!" Emily cried, scrambling onto the ground beside him. Surrounded by palpable terror, they breathed heavily, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they rose to their feet. The ethereal glow of the exit loomed before them, brighter than anything they had experienced. "That's it. That's our way out." They sprinted toward the light, determination propelling them forward. David could almost feel the freedom washing over them as they propelled through the threshold, leaving behind the prison of dark memories. But just as they crossed the border, a chilling voice called out, "You cannot forget." It reverberated with dark power. Shadows chased them, curling with rage, but this time David was not willing to submit. He turned, gripping Emily's hand tightly, and shouted defiantly, "We will not become part of whatever darkness you are. You don't own us. The shadows writhed at his words, twisting back momentarily as the light flared. Something within him surged, not just courage, but a resolve to fight against the darkness of despair that had sought to claim their souls, and with that strength, a blinding flash erupted from the light, the kind that promised not just safety, but liberation. They squeezed each other's hand, bracing themselves for that brilliant force, daring to believe they could emerge victorious. In an instant, they were through, a breath flooding his lungs. The world around them shifted, a stark, vibrant contrast from the shadows they had escaped. They collapsed onto soft grass, the sky overhead a brilliant blue with sunlight shimmering warmly around them. Did we make it? Emily gasped, glancing around, searching for peril, but only finding the gentle rustling of trees and singing birds. David looked at her, disbelief flickering in his chest. We did, we're free. That moment hung suspended, the weight of terror lifting like unfinished shadows, fading into whispers carried away by the wind. They embraced fiercely, tears flowing as laughter bubbled up, a mixture of joy and release. Each of them had faced their own darkness, miraculously rising above it together, but they knew, deep down, an unshakable truth. They had escaped, but the memories would linger, perhaps to remind them of where they had been and of the darkness that lingers in unseen corners, always waiting. Let us go home, David finally managed, looking into Emily's eyes, both of them resolute, knowing that wherever they went next, they carried a piece of that darkness with them. Yet that darkness would not define them. It would only serve as evidence of their strength, of the fierce will to protect each other in the face of everything. As they walked away from the cabin and into the sunlight, David knew they had prevailed against the shadows, proving that hope can thrive even in the darkest of places. They would cherish every moment, every joy, and every laughter, reminding themselves no matter where they wandered, light always triumphs over darkness. Now, if you loved this story, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive tales that will grip your heart. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and keep the stories coming. I want to see you flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Share what this journey meant for you, and for the love of all that is terrifying, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel. Only true fans understand the importance of these actions. Let us keep this ride going together.